Are you one of the few people who have saved hard for a deposit to buy your dream home when prices start to finally fall? You were waiting patiently and had to sleep countless days on the couch because you did not listen to your wife who blackmailed you to finally pull the trigger? You firmly believed that prices would come down one day again and stood your ground. With the current outbreak, you thought that now property prices would collapse and that it would be finally your time to jump in, only to get disappointed so far. What is happening? Why is nothing happening? You are asking yourself. Let me explain in this video. Hi guys, I'm Dan from the Investment ABC, and in this video I'm going to explain why the property prices in Australia haven't declined substantially yet, and if they will in the coming years, or if the property bulls will be right and the prices will never fall substantially. The current outbreak devastated the economies around the globe like anything most of us have seen so far in our lives. The official unemployment rate in Australia rose from 5.2% before the outbreak to 6.2% right now. The problem with this statistic is that approximately 6 million people aren't counted who are on the JobKeeper program and another 1 million who are on the Job Seeker program. These people are also not working and producing anything at the moment. If you count them into the unemployment rate, which would be a cleaner calculation method, because they're not working right now, you would see an unemployment rate of over 50%. The government just hopes that all of these people will head back to work once the outbreak is over, but who knows how many of these people will be able to get their jobs back once the dust settles. History shows us that it won't be that many. In the recession of the early 1980s, the unemployment rate almost doubled, increasing from 5.5% to 10.5% in 2 years. But it took 6.5 years for the unemployment rate to drop back to where it started before the recession. The difference between the 1980s recession and our current recession is that the economy wasn't saturated with such high debt levels back then, and the RBA had a lot of room to lower interest rates and stimulate the economy. Nowadays, everyone is drowning in debt, and the cash rate is at 0.25%, so almost zero. This means that there is hardly any room left now to stimulate the economy through monetary policies. What the government and central banks are doing currently is keeping the system alive by injecting as much currency as needed to prevent major bankruptcies and defaults into the system. It is not only the Australian government that is supporting people to bridge a couple of months, but the whole world. The support includes deferral of mortgage payments for up to 6 months and a 6-month moratorium on residential tenancy evictions. These coordinated global actions are the primary reason why property prices haven't collapsed yet. But what happens after the 6 months when banks are demanding their repayments again, especially when the principal is bigger due to the accumulation of interest payments over the 6 months? If you had a home loan of 400,000 Australian dollars with a 3% interest rate, for example, you would owe the bank 406,000 after the 6 months are over. After 6 months, the banks will either demand the continuation of mortgage repayments or they need to give another 3 to 6 months respite for their customers. But no matter when it is going to happen, the moment borrowers have to pay their home loans again, you will see a historic rise in mortgage stress and defaults. Property owners are praying that the economy will recover and that they will be able to continue to pay their mortgages. They don't have many options left at the moment. Many homeowners are clinging on to their properties until the last second and until they're really forced to sell. After all, it is the Australian dream they don't want to give up yet. But even for those owners who are seeing what might be coming soon, it is really hard to sell the home and find a buyer at the moment, so many don't even try to list their home yet. Potential buyers, on the other hand, are waiting for better deals, so it is literally the calm before the storm. I have been expecting a property Armageddon for 2021 in Australia even before the outbreak because of the massive debt levels the country accumulated over the past 28 years without a recession. In capitalism, a recession is cleaning the system from too much debt, speculation, and malinvestment. It is punishing all those greedy and over-leveraged market participants and rewarding all those who are able to manage their money and wealth properly. Furthermore, it provides younger generations an opportunity to buy assets and build wealth. If central banks constantly prevent recessions by decreasing interest rates and expanding the money supply, they're deliberately weakening the economy in the long run. Australia kicked the can down the road to an extent that it already hit a brick wall right now. The problem it currently faces is that by having postponed a recession in the past for such a long time, the amount of consumer debt is sky high even compared to other countries like the US. The household debt to GDP ratio in Australia is currently 120%, while in the US it is only 75%. The high consumer debt in combination with the outbreak and the global recession for the whole world at the same time will most likely lead to an extremely severe and painful recession for Australia, which will probably last longer than most economists think. In 2008, for example, the Western world went into a recession, but some countries like China and Australia weren't hit. This time, China won't be able to support our economy by buying all our resources because their growth slowed down also significantly. Furthermore, the construction boom is over and our tourism is suffering like never before during this outbreak, since Australia is just too far away from the rest of the world. Who wants to be in an airplane for 10 or 20 hours just to visit Australia at this time? I really can't see anything that will save the property market this time around. I know your local real estate agent told you he thinks it is the best time to get into the market right now. Buy during the crisis when there is blood in the streets and everyone is scared, right? Interest rates are at record lows, so you should take advantage of them, right? The government and central banks won't allow the property market to fail. It is just too important, right? Do not listen to people who have an interest when property prices keep rising. Use your own intellect. Buying a home is maybe the biggest decision in your life, so think before jumping in. Do you have sufficient deposits and savings to buy a property? Is your job safe? Do you have an emergency savings in case you get unemployed or sick? What happens when interest rates start to increase in the next 5 years? Are you still be able to pay the mortgage? Is renting maybe a better option right now? These are some basic questions you should ask yourself before jumping into the property market at any time. In my opinion, this downturn in property prices will be maybe one of the worst in Australia's history. High unemployment will soon show its effects on the property market. It is going to be harder and harder for landlords to find good tenants who can afford to pay these high rents, especially in big cities like Sydney and Melbourne. Good tenants with high paying jobs who rent will be scarce, and landlords will soon see themselves confronted with tenants who demand a rent reduction. The problem with that is that all those property investors who are over-leveraged with 5, 10 or 50 properties and who are reliant on their rent income paying off their mortgages will see themselves in deep trouble soon. They will be forced to deleverage and sell some of these properties as soon as possible. The problem is that they will need to do it at a time when many other investors will do the same thing. It is not only the big investors with a lot of equity who have more than one property, but normal employees bought also one or two investment properties to profit from the housing boom. At the moment, many investors believe that all the currency creation the central banks are doing right now will lead to high inflation rates and an increase in asset prices. Therefore, they are trying to hold on to their properties to offload at higher prices or beat inflation. But in my opinion, the timing will be off and we will see a deflationary period with falling asset prices before we see ultimately way higher inflation rates. I don't really know how long this deflationary period will last, but it will last long enough to wipe out most of those who are too over leveraged right now. We will most likely see deflation first because people are out of work and they're scared to spend the same way they used to do. For inflation to pick up, the velocity of money needs to increase, and that only happens when consumers are confident about the economy or lose confidence in the currency. In my opinion, this will happen at a later stage when we see finally bank bail-ins and negative interest rates implemented. But before that happens, the deflationary forces need to do its work. I feel really sorry for all those poor souls who are buying into the market right now. The risk is so high, I would rank it a 12 out of 10 if I could. Buyers who are jumping in right now will most likely suffer first in the coming deflationary period, afterward in the inflationary period, and finally again in another deflationary period, if the Fed decides to increase interest rates aggressively to combat runaway inflation. I'm sorry for being so negative on property prices right now, but I don't know how we can avoid a decline in property prices except for printing money and just paying people's mortgages outright. I'm not alone now with my doomsday predictions. The big four banks are predicting similar declines, with Commonwealth Bank being the most pessimistic and predicting a 32% decline by the end of 2022. NAB is predicting a 30% decline, Westpac a 20% one, and ANZ a 10% decline. Many people commented on my previous videos that the banks won't let this happen. They would never tighten credit because they would get hurt themselves. In my opinion, the banks will slowly tighten credit and are preparing for a severe decline in property prices. Well, if things are really going sour for the banks, there is still the taxpayer or the depositors who will most likely pay the price. This video is by no means financial advice, just my own opinion, and maybe I'm completely wrong and property prices will go to the moon because the Australian dollar keeps falling and falling. Who knows? Grab your popcorn and let's see what will happen. But if you agree with my assessment and we are due for some rough times, please hit the like button to support the channel, subscribe for future videos about the Australian property market, and comment what you think will happen with property prices in the next 2 to 3 years. Bye guys, and see you in the next one.